We are very lucky this evening. Our speaker said I shouldn't say nice things about him, but I have only nice things to say about him. So Dan Kurland grew up here at North Shore Congregation, Israel. For a few years, he even ran the religious school on Sundays as the right hand of our then Director of Religious Education, making sure all the trains ran on time, so we're grateful for that. Some of you have been here in services over the years when Dan's been at the keyboard. He is currently the head of music at Opera Halle in Germany. This is his second season, and it follows 4 years in Hagen, Germany. He has his PhD from Juilliard and his PhD and his master's, his graduate degree from the University of Texas. He is an incredible pianist, an incredible teacher, incredible director of music, and an insightful person looking at the world, Judaism, and how the worlds come together. So Dan Kurland, thank you for being with us this evening, and I invite you to the bima. Yeah, we did it all for you. Okay, it's going to blow away if you don't want to. Okay?
All right, thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Green, and Shabbat Shalom to you all. It's wonderful to be back at North Shore, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak this Shabbat. What a summer it's been. The last time I spoke at Shabbat services was 4 years ago in 2018 to share some impressions and observations after my first year of living in Germany. Since then, I, like you all, have done my best to survive a pandemic, as well as the other life things that never ceased happening. For me, that included moving to the east of Germany and beginning a new and challenging job, where I will say, they do not run the trains on time in Germany. Big misnomer. But before we go any further, many of you have likely traveled a bit in your lives, either domestically or abroad, and you may have found that when speaking to people along the way, one of the first questions you're usually asked is, where are you from? I have to fall on my sword with a confession. I admit, for reasons of pure practicality and brevity, I've been known recently to occasionally answer New York. I know, I'm sorry. But if you allow me a moment to explain. I moved to Germany from New York, where I had been living for 7 years, and it was the longest of any place I'd lived since I went off to college. New York was that magical, coming-of-age graduate school experience in my 20s when I may have been much more certain of absolutely everything than I probably should have been. Exactly, right. New York remains the city I know best, and a part of me will always be there. But I've always thought that question, where are you from, is more a conversation starter about mutual places and interests, not necessarily an invitation to give or receive one's life story. And so, since I just moved from New York, it seemed like the easiest answer. Europeans know where New York is, though sometimes struggle to find Chicago on the map. And they do often know Home Alone was filmed in our area, on the North Shore, but they call it the film by its literal German translation, Kevin allein zu Hause. Honestly. Moving between cities and continents has given me both perspective and time to ruminate about some things. That rumination has been reinforced by being far away from a community that I admittedly hadn't always felt connected to, but I've known quite well. And so I wondered, where are we really from? Where is home, and what is community? Some of my impressions are still being formed based on my absence from the North Shore, but the last 6 weeks have taught us all a great deal. My current work in Germany, as Rabbi Green mentioned, centers around opera, and one of my favorite lines comes from Der Rosenkavalier. One of the characters says, Die Zeit, die ist ein sonderbar Ding. So for those whose Yiddish is rusty or whose German is non-existent, it translates to time is a very curious thing. I'd invite you to consider, though, that not only is time curious, but so is memory. Often as time increases, memory fades. We hang on and remember certain moments, specifically firsts and recurrences. Those are particularly impressionable, and I think many of us can summon vivid recollections of all the holidays with Grandma's gefilte fish, or the many times our father wore that special cologne. And as I began to wonder how one answers that question, where are you from? Maybe the answer was actually easier than I thought. I found myself having many wonderful memories of this synagogue, which is a place of firsts and recurrences for many of us. But only now have I begun to see how my first 18 years of life here really taught me what a community can be. Since leaving Highland Park over 15 years ago, I've made 7 big moves. For anyone about to go off to college, 2 quick tips. Packing never gets easier, but throwing things out does. My time away meant I was often able to return to North Shore Congregation Israel. I was unable to. And so I had to branch out and open myself for the new customs and traditions of wherever I was observing or celebrating. One thing we've undoubtedly learned these last years is that we are social beings. To be human is to connect. Community fosters connection, and while I've been pleasantly surprised that so many different places welcomed me as a stranger, I've never quite found a community like this one, right here. My undergraduate experience in Austin, Texas, included deep involvement in Hillel. I received great support as I tried to build a high holiday service from scratch that featured the very same music, which is an integral part of our worship at North Shore Congregation Israel. The cello playing Kol Nidre, the grandeur of hearing Avinu Malkeinu. It was during that experience I realized that for me, a holiday service without real music was not a high holiday service at all. Only did I then know not only how impressionable our synagogue was, but I could only miss it when I was no longer here. While I think back to the commendable job we did in Austin, it also made me appreciate how North Shore Congregation Israel creates a place where prayer is personal yet communal, special yet private, all at once. After 4 years, I was excited to move to New York, the land of bagels and knishes and people who got my Catskills era Jewish jokes. It also had a large Jewish population, and services could be grand, but apartments were often small, so there's no guarantee that a transplant like me, see, I admit it, can immediately find his own mishpocha. I eventually did find a wonderful group of South African Jews who welcomed me as their own. But the beauty and danger of New York is how transient it is, and the one constant is rapid change. That group has now scattered to the 4 corners, and almost no one is still in New York. I may have had a community for that period in my life, but it isn't one I could return to now, simply because it no longer exists. It was ephemeral in its nature. It was not North Shore Congregation Israel. And my 5 years in Germany have shown me 2 very different communities of Jews, where I've experienced generosity and been welcomed as a stranger, but I can also say I don't feel quite at home in a German, Russian, Orthodox synagogue or service. I guess you could say I'm a 2022 version of the Wandering Jew. Of course, these are all somewhat new reflections I've had in the wake of the mass shooting on July 4th. I was in Germany when the news broke, but despite my not having lived in the Chicago area for more than 15 years and spending less time here each year, I felt the visceral need to be with the community. I wondered, what does this feeling mean? Can a community really be temporary? Can it really be forever? What if you're gone a very long time? This week's Torah portion provides confusion, not clarity. It's one of the greatest hits in the Torah, where the Israelites receive the 10 Commandments. But not to be missed is the simultaneously explosive and problematic text where the Jews are labeled a type of chosen people. You can really go down a rabbit hole of rabbinic scholars on this topic, so I'll leave it to the real ones to discuss it further. But what struck me in this parsha, however, was that the Jews were far from a perfect people. They did not wait patiently to receive the 10 Commandments. They built a golden calf. They're often described as stiff-necked and stubborn. The chosen people has been argued about, and that term has carried its share of problems, but most believe it has been significantly misinterpreted and should not be taken literally. Even Fiddler on the Roofs, Reb Tevye once said, I know, we are your chosen people, but once in a while, can't you choose someone else? Maybe, however, it's not so much about a chosen people, but more so, what do the people choose? And what we can choose, time and time again, is community. Something I learned by being so far away on July 4th was I didn't really know what this community was until I really needed it. It may be easier to feel an urgent need for community in times of crisis and bereavement, but that pain we share is understood only as the polar opposite to the many simchas in life that we choose to celebrate here, together. I was lucky to learn a great deal and share experiences with all of you through my years at North Shore Congregation Israel, and even those interactions were more frequent when I was living here. They feel no less important or less relatable now. Perhaps one reason North Shore Congregation Israel still remains a home for me is thanks to that one thing in life for which there is no, nor can there ever be a substitute: time. The formative early years I had in this synagogue were just that, formative. I once had a music professor say that practicing an instrument is like money in the bank. The more one does early on, the more benefits it reaps later. Like many of you, even if you aren't a regular at services or Torah study or social justice programs, if you take a moment to think about how much time you've spent here, I bet you'll find it's a lot, marked by ordinary interactions or major life cycle events. There are many opportunities we have to give back and be involved, but these last 6 weeks have also reminded me of the vital support that a synagogue provides for us, even when you're far away. In moments none of us can stand upright alone, if we're shoulder to shoulder with one another, we can lean on each other for support, and none of us will fall. So I promise, I did not set out, nor was I asked to make this sound like a Yom Kippur pledge. But after traveling to some different and distant places with longer and shorter involvements at synagogues, the importance of one's own community has never been clearer. And a final story came to mind. In a large city, there's a street with pizza shop after pizza shop after pizza shop. The first one had a sign, and it said, "Best pizza in the city." And if you walked a few doors down, the next one boasted more selections and had a sign that read, "Best pizza in the country." And even more ungepatscht, its neighbor had the biggest store, and its sign read, "Best pizza in the world." No one knew where to go for a slice. Lots of confusion. But next to that biggest and fanciest store was a pretty humble, clean, beautiful pizza shop. It didn't try to do too much. What they did very well. There was something for everyone. Their customers always returned. And its sign, "Best pizza on the block." What home means can change a lot over time. And I'm not sure we can always go back to exactly what it was. But I think I've learned, if we're away for some time, there's bound to be a place for you when you want to return, even if it's for a moment. And for me, that means coming back to the best synagogue on the block. Shabbat Shalom.